Hey Nick, how you doing?
Yeah, good to see you again, Woody. Another Friday.
Indeed, second podcast of the year, and should be a good little chat. Keen-eyed people know I'm wearing my hat again. I got so much stick for wearing this last time by one particular reader. Apparently, it's too American. What do you think? I think it's a great hat.
What is it? It's two elephants in a.
Yeah, it's a Chang hat. When I went to Chang
Oh,
beer when I went to Thailand.
you went to Thailand. Yeah,
Yeah,
I should have
I bought
recognized
four of them. They're awesome.
that.
Well, today we're talking about gold, Nick, or you're talking about gold more to the point, and you explore some pretty fascinating dynamics taking place, especially how currency movements have been a major driver of the returns for Australian gold investors, and why 2025 might require a bit of a different approach to playing the bull market. So let's dive straight in. Can you just explain? You highlight a disconnect between gold's performance in USD and Aussie dollar terms in 2024, driven by currency movements. Can you just before we begin, or to set the scene, elaborate on how investors should think about that when investing in gold and gold stocks, especially given the outlook we'll get into for 2025?
Yeah, because it's all going to change.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
narrative of
right.
2020, the narrative of 2024 was that the gold price went up a lot. It was one of the top performing assets.
Yeah.
But in US dollar terms, which is effectively the global price, so think of it as the true price of gold, that bull market actually ended around Halloween. And since then, gold went through a bit of a correction. It's been sort of trending sideways.
Yeah.
And it's probably setting up for a whole new burst higher over the next year. But the interesting part of this is that in Australian dollar terms, the gold price actually pretty much continued going up. The base of the trend continued to rise because the Aussie dollar crashed. The Aussie dollar fell so much that it supercharged investors' gains in gold. I think the comparative amounts are it went up 24% in terms of US dollars, but about 30 something percent in terms of Aussie dollars over the calendar year. So that exchange rate added a huge tailwind for Australian investors, as we said it would, as we've often talked about in these videos and in our articles for Fat Tail Daily.
Mhm.
The question is whether that can continue for next year, right? Or whether we need to have a change of strategy.
And I think there is a change coming, as you just alluded to. But yeah, you point out the kind of the unusual situation of the Aussie dollar being at crisis levels without an obvious crisis. Can you explain what you mean by that? And then maybe some specific catalysts that you see potentially driving an Aussie dollar recovery in 2025.
Yeah, there are some currencies that go up when there's a crisis or an economic crash or a financial crash of some sort. And there are some currencies that go down. And so we have risk on currencies and risk off currencies. So the yen and the US dollar tend to go up whenever there's some sort of crisis anywhere in the world. And the Aussie dollar tends to go down. And we've had that play out. We've had the Aussie dollar go down and especially the US dollar absolutely soaring over the last year. But there hasn't been the crisis, the obvious crisis at least, that you would associate with that sort of financial market action. And the question is whether there has been some sort of crisis or is imminently going to be, or whether this has been an overreaction and there hasn't been a crisis. So the rubber band is going to snap back, which implies that in the next year, the US dollar will fall and the Aussie dollar will rise, which would be a reversal of what's happened in 2024. The reason for the Aussie dollar's fall is arguably what's going on in China. So we've had an economic slowdown and some issues in China. My concern or my issue with that explanation is that it's been the US dollar's surge that's really been the biggest story here. The US dollar outperformed dramatically in 2024 against a whole host of different currencies, a very long list actually, the Aussie dollar being just one of them. So really, we should have had some sort of crash or crisis or issue in order to justify the US dollar surging so much. There hasn't been one, which is a bit of a mystery, and I'm not sure how to address it, other than to say it sets up the reversal that could come in 2025 of a falling US dollar and therefore rising Aussie dollar.
Yeah, and I don't know what happens beyond 2025, but it feels like this is it feels like maybe it's like Trump coming in. There's a kind of like I don't want to say the phrase Trump bump in the market, but it feels like there's that might be a cause for the Aussie dollar to strengthen. But how might this affect different ways of playing the gold market specifically?
Yeah, so it's a bit confusing, right? Because if the US dollar is going to be pushed down by Trump and possibly by some international cooperation on that, because it's just too high,
Yeah.
that implies a rising gold price. So it should be good for gold investors. However, if the Aussie dollar's value goes up so much, that could offset the rise in the gold price, right? So it's unclear whether in our forecast, on my forecast, the Aussie dollar will go up more or less than the US dollar gold price. But the point is that the tailwind for Aussie gold investors in 2024 of the Aussie dollar falling would become a headwind for in 2025. So you'd have to expect the gold price to go up more than the Aussie dollar if you're an Australian dollar gold investor, if you're based in Australia as a gold investor. And my point in the article this week is that instead of sitting in gold directly, which has served you so well in 2024, it's now time to transition into an investment that leverages the gold price so that the good performance of gold in US dollar terms is leveraged, outperforms dramatically whatever might happen to the Aussie dollar. And the way to do that is gold stocks.
Yeah, I was going to come to that next. So you say gold stocks are trading at, or you say in your piece that they're trading at 2020 levels despite much higher gold prices. Beyond what's happened since, we've had the pandemic and inflation disruptions, and as you mentioned, that you mentioned those in the piece. But what other factors might explain that disconnect, and what could trigger a catch-up phase?
Yeah, it's sort of doubly dramatic, right? You've got the underperformance of gold stocks relative to gold, and then you've got this currency factor. And I think they're both in gold stock investors' favor in 2025. So why have gold stocks performed so badly? Well, the pandemic, it's literally the things you listed there. It's the pandemic, the disruption of their business models, the inflation, that pushed up the gold price, also pushed up gold miners' costs.
Yeah.
So they didn't end up turning that gold bull market into much profit. Historically speaking, the gold stocks should leverage gold's gains. That did not happen last year, let alone over the last few years. So the reasons for that are unlikely to repeat, right? We're not going to have another pandemic, I don't think. We're not going to have another burst of inflation for costs for gold miners. We're not going to have all of these crisis issues that they had over the last few years. So I think not only is the gold mining sector going to catch up to gold, it is also not going to face those same headwinds as the gold price continues to rise. Yeah. So you've got undervalued, a gold bull market, and the exchange rate all in your favor.
So basically what you're saying is that 2025 might see a more typical gold bull market driven by US dollar devaluation. Just final question, how do you see that playing out differently then from the 2020 to 2024 period, particularly for gold mining companies?
Yeah, so I think we'll go to a more typical gold bull market in the added sense that gold miners outperform the gold price. Typically, they tend to perform twice or three times as well as the gold price. I don't know if that's going to be the case again, but the point is that they've lagged relative to the gold price. So you'd expect them to outperform, not just on the basis of the gold price rising, but on the basis that they're already starting from a starting position that's well behind relative to the gold price. The caveat here is that the question is whether you invest in Aussie gold stocks or US gold stocks. And I think there's an opportunity in Australian gold stocks because of this exchange rate issue. If you invest in US-based gold stocks, as the Aussie dollar rises, that will pay back your returns, whereas Aussie gold stocks shouldn't face that same problem to the same extent, at least, depending on where they operate, how they hedge their expenses and their currency risks. So I think it's time for some careful stock picking in the gold mining market from someone who understands which companies are hedged for which different types of risks and which ones are exposed to the right types of risks. And so there's an opportunity here to filter out the sorts of stocks that will underperform based on the factors that we've talked about today, like the exchange rate and the gold price, and which ones will outperform to add even more gains to the potential ones that are just on the back of the gold price rising.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. Funny you say that. We do have just the right person for that. His name is Brian Chu, and we are holding an event with him. Well, it's open now and it's on till early next week, so do check that out. It's highlighted Nick's article today. If you'd like to read that for free, all the it's based. This is exactly what this conversation was based on. The links below. Check it out. Thank you, Nick. Any plans for the new year for you?
No, the whole family was sick over Christmas and New Year, so I'm still recovering. I feel like there was absolutely no holiday or break involved whatsoever. I've still got the cough, as you might have heard earlier, so I haven't had any time to make any plans.
Oh well, you're looking well anyway. Cheers, mate. We'll see you next week.
Bye.